In this video, we'll be taking a look at 4 college basketball games happening on January 21st, 2026, and providing you with free team picks and total picks for each one of those games, so 8 picks in total. Welcome back to Cash Out Sports. Let's dive right into it. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe and to click the bell icon to get notified as soon as these videos get released so that you have more time to plan out your bets as we provide these videos on a daily basis. I can guarantee that you'll have all the important information that you'll need on these 4 college basketball games after fully watching this video. One more thing before we start, if you would like to gain access to our best exclusive sports picks to take your journey to the next level, then check out our Patreon in the link down below, where we offer our best single picks, parlay picks, and much more. Now let's get started. Virginia Tech versus Syracuse. This matchup between Virginia Tech and Syracuse looks like one of those games you glance at and think, yeah, could go either way. But once you slow down and actually walk through how these two like to play, the picture shifts a bit. Virginia Tech comes in at 14-5, fresh off that feel-good game where they dropped 89 on Notre Dame and probably felt like they could score on a peach basket. Syracuse sits at 12-6, coming home after that frustrating overtime loss at Boston College, where they were in control for most of the night and still let it slip. That mix, a confident road offense running hot and a home crowd that feels like their team owes them a response, usually gives the building a little extra bite, especially in a place that already echoes when the fans get going. Virginia Tech's personality this season is pretty clear. They want to play fast, they want to push touches into the paint, and they are very comfortable turning games into free throw contests. They are scoring just over 82 points per game, usually in those low 70s possessions, and when you replay that Notre Dame result in your head, it was them at their best, attacking early, finding driving lanes, and cashing in at the line with 28 makes on 32 tries. That sort of rhythm feels great at home, with familiar rims and friendly whistles, and it can look unstoppable when shots are falling. On the road, though, against a defense that does not mind a little bumping and has a shot blocker waiting if you actually do get inside, that same style can feel more like wading through traffic. Syracuse under Adrian Autry has leaned into a very different identity, one that looks built for exactly this kind of test. They put length on the floor almost everywhere. They have William Kyle III cleaning things up at the rim, and the guards and wings actually seem to enjoy making opponents work for every catch. Opponents are sitting in that 67 to 68 point range against them, and their defensive efficiency comfortably lives in that mid-20s territory nationally, which is the zone where teams stop talking about you as pesky and start admitting that nothing comes easy. And when you are thinking about who can not only win a game but also maintain a margin, having a defense that refuses to hand out cheap looks or free cuts is a huge starting point. On offense, Syracuse is not trying to drag games into the mud, even if people sometimes expect that. Their best version is pretty balanced. Nathan George runs the show, J.J. Starling chooses his spots to attack, and Donnie Freeman gets to his mid-range and paint touches in a calm, almost methodical way. Nate Kings can step in and have a big scoring night, like he just showed against Boston College, and the rest of the rotation fits around that with enough shooting and size to keep the floor spaced. All of that lets Syracuse match Virginia Tech possession for possession when they need to, but they do it without turning the game into a track meet that leaves their defense gasping. The key contrast is simple. Syracuse can put the ball in the basket without breaking their defensive shape, while Virginia Tech tends to shine most in games where both teams are racing and the scoreboard is spinning. Depth and availability quietly matter a lot when you are talking about spreads, and here that piece leans toward the home side as well. Syracuse has its main rotation ready to go, with Freeman, Starling, George, Kings, Kyle, Kean Anthony, and Tyler Betsy all in the mix, and only freshman guard Aaron Womack sitting out on a planned red shirt. Virginia Tech is still without guard Tyler Johnson, and they lean quite a bit on the same central group of Amani Hansberry, Toby Lowell, Ben Hammond, Jalen Bedford, and Christian Gurdek to carry a heavy load. Over 40 minutes, that kind of reliance tends to show up in the small things, like how sharp closeouts look late, how fresh legs feel on drives, and how confident teams are when they go to their bench during little swings in momentum. There is also the human side that numbers never fully capture, and honestly, it matters. Syracuse led Boston College for well over 30 minutes, then watched the game twist away in overtime with turnovers and shaky late decisions. That kind of loss sticks with a team, and it usually turns the very next home appearance into a bit of a statement chance. Film sessions after a game like that are not exactly fun, but they tend to lock in focus, especially when the next opponent is a Virginia Tech squad that just scored in bunches and will get plenty of buzz on social feeds and highlight shows. And all of this plays out back in the Dome, where Syracuse has already handled teams like St. Joseph's and Florida State in games that required poise in the final stretch. So when you roll together the revenge energy, the defensive backbone, and the comfort of playing in front of their own crowd, you get a version of Syracuse that feels built not just to hang around, but to gradually tilt the game their way as the minutes drain away. So, if you picture how this will look late, you can easily imagine Virginia Tech going on those scary little runs, hitting a couple of big shots, and reminding everyone why their offense has been so productive. But as whistles add up, legs get heavy, and possessions slow down, the style that leans on defense, length, and a steady home rotation is more likely to hold firm. In that kind of script, the team that is calmer in the half court and less dependent on chaos usually has the better chance to build and actually hold a multi-possession gap rather than living on a final shot. As our first pick for this matchup, the Syracuse Orange to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. Odds makers have this total number sitting in that low 150s range, which makes sense on the surface. You glance at Virginia Tech's profile, see those 82 points per game and the higher tempo, remember a few wild-looking final scores on both sides, and the picture in your head is pretty simple, a fun, fast game where both teams get up and down. To a lot of people, that automatically sounds like a script full of points. Here is the thing though, once you start thinking about how these two actually generate their scoring, that total starts to feel a touch ambitious. Syracuse's defensive core is not just hype. They hold teams to that 67 to 68 point pocket, they sit in the mid-20s in defensive efficiency, and they use their length plus Kyle's rim protection to squeeze air out of possessions. You can almost feel the frustration from opposing offenses, because even when they finally create a semi-clean look, it usually came after working deep into the clock. That kind of defense does not usually produce the free-flowing, both teams in the 80s type of rhythm that a high total needs. Their recent results fit that picture pretty neatly. St. Joseph's, which absolutely can score, ended up stuck on 63 in the Dome while Syracuse managed things on their side and walked away with a 71 to 63 result. Florida State scored 86 in the same building, yet people walked away talking more about Syracuse's own shot-making and execution than about some non-stop run-and-gun chaos. Even that overtime game at Boston College tells you something. It was 73 to 73 after regulation, and Syracuse had spent much of the day controlling things before turnovers, and one massive shot helped push it into extra time. This is not a team that hates pace, but they clearly prefer games that breathe without completely flipping into full offensive fireworks for both sides at once. On the Virginia Tech side, that Notre Dame performance looks like the perfect commercial for a higher scoring expectation at first glance. 89 points, smooth offense, everyone feeling comfortable. Then you remember how much of that came from the stripe. Those 28 free throw makes on 32 attempts are a huge part of the final number. Trips to the line can be great if you care about efficiency, but they quietly slow games down. They break rhythm, and they give defenses time to set up while the scoreboard crawls along. In this matchup, going against a Syracuse defense that already tends to funnel things toward the half court, that same foul-hunting approach is more likely to drag the pace down than push it higher. There is also the rhythm adjustment factor that shows up after a painful loss. Syracuse is coming off a game where giveaways directly fed Boston College's scoring. You can almost hear the coaches in every meeting, preaching better decisions, cleaner possessions, and fewer gifts in transition. When a defensively strong team tightens up that side of its offensive decision-making, you usually get longer trips down the floor, more deliberate touches for their main scorers, and fewer of those quick threes that, if they miss, turn into instant runouts. Virginia Tech knows they are walking into a tough environment as well, so they are unlikely to treat this like some casual race from the opening tip. Games like that usually start with both sides feeling each other out, drift into a steady half-court rhythm, and then finish with possessions that feel heavier, where coaches call sets and every shot is weighed just a little more carefully. So, while the raw talent on both offenses might tempt you to picture a back-and-forth shootout, the way these two create good looks, combined with Syracuse's defensive influence and Virginia Tech's reliance on free throws, points more toward a game that stays controlled. There will still be momentum swings. There will still be stretches where it feels like both teams might suddenly go nuclear for a few minutes, because that is basketball. But the underlying script suggests something more measured than the total number hints at, a contest where control and patience win out over chaos on the scoreboard. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. Washington versus Nebraska. Nebraska at home in the middle of winter does not really feel like a basketball game. It feels like the visitors got tossed into a loud red washing machine and someone hit the extra spin cycle button. You have an undefeated group here, sitting at 18-0 overall and 7-0 in conference play, with a top 10 ranking and the longest active win streak hanging over the court like a neon sign reminding everyone who walks in what they are up against. That alone would get the market's attention, so it is no surprise the spread sits in that double-digit zone, around a 10.5 to 11.5 point number at most books, which looks chunky until you notice how Nebraska has been treating margins. Let me explain. They are winning by right around 16 points per night on average, scoring a touch over 80 while holding teams in the mid-60s, which is not just winning, it is winning with a certain casual cruelty. Against the number, they have been ahead of the closing line by roughly 5 points on average, which is basically their way of telling oddsmakers, nice try, but you are still short. At home, they are a perfect 11-0, and that building feels like a cheat code. Washington on the road, by comparison, sits at 2-4, and that contrast matters when you are talking spreads and not just vibes. Here is the thing that really tilts the board. It is not just how often Nebraska wins, it is how they do it. They lean into a high-volume three-point profile, firing from deep with confidence and structure, and they sit at the front of the conference in makes and attempts. Washington, on the other side of that coin, is trudging through the season with the worst three-point percentage in the league, floating around that 30 to 31% mark. So you end up with one team that treats the three-point line like a trusted friend and another that treats it like that awkward coworker you nod to in the hallway but never really want shooting in crunch time. Layer on the health side and it tilts even more. Washington is walking in with bodies missing, multiple rotation forwards and guards either ruled out or tagged as questionable, including a forward shutdown for the year with a foot issue and others dealing with knee and vague lower body concerns. That squeezes their front court and their ball handling, which is exactly where you do not want to be thin against a team that can stretch the floor and then punish you when the help is late. Nebraska, by contrast, still has its main rotation intact, with the injury list focused more on depth pieces than the core guys who actually soak up the big minutes. If you want a picture of how this kind of mismatch looks in real time, just peek at what has been happening when Washington steps into tough spots lately. They took an 80-63 punch from Michigan State and then an 82-72 shot from Michigan in quick succession, and those are the sort of results that tell you what happens when their current roster meets a high-quality, organized team in a charged environment. Now they head into another hornet's nest against an unbeaten group that already has a habit of taking close-looking pregame lines and blowing them open by the middle of the second half. So when you stack the undefeated record, the fat average margin, the consistent edge against the spread, the three-point gap, the home and road split, and Washington's health and recent skid, all those little details keep nudging the same way for the side. As our first pick for this matchup, the Nebraska Cornhuskers to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. You look at the board and see a projected total hanging in that high 140s area, flirting with around 150.5 depending on where you check, and at first glance it feels logical. One team scores around 80, the other scores around 80, the casual brain goes, alright, so we are getting some fireworks tonight. Honestly, that is where a lot of people stop thinking. They just mash the offensive averages together like you are mixing two flavors of Gatorade and assume the blend will taste like points. But the way Nebraska games actually play out tells a softer story for the scoreboard. They might score in the 80s, sure, but they have turned a bunch of opponents into bystanders in the low to mid-50s. You can rattle off recent examples at home: 90-55, 86-55, 78-55, 90-60, and the pattern is pretty clear. They defend with discipline, they clean the glass, and once they get a comfortable lead, the pace shifts. The ball still moves, but the urgency melts away a bit, and time starts dripping off the clock possession by possession. Let me explain why that matters so much for the total. A team that wins big but keeps attacking at maximum speed can send games into that chaotic, open gym style where the total sneaks over late. Nebraska does almost the opposite. They smother you, build a cushion, and then lean into control. That kind of approach is brutal for an over ticket because you are not just asking for scoring, you are asking for sustained scoring from both sides for 40 minutes, and that is not how their script usually reads. Washington's side of this total story is not exactly friendly to an over either. When they have stepped up into heavier competition recently, the offense has hit mud. That 82-72 outing against Michigan and that 80-63 loss to Michigan State show that when they meet physical, connected defenses, their efficiency drops and the flow gets choppy. Take that same offense, already dealing with those injuries, missing a forward for the season and juggling several other wounded or questionable rotation pieces, and drop it onto the road in a loud arena, and you are not exactly setting the stage for smooth, free-scoring basketball. You also have to remember how the betting results have gone for totals with these two so far. Nebraska has leaned toward lower results, hitting the under more often than not, landing somewhere like 6 to 12 against the over on the season. Washington has also seen more unders than overs, sitting at something like 7 to 11 against the total. That is not noise. That is a sign the market keeps expecting more points than these teams are actually delivering over a decent sample of games. So when you stir it all together, you are not just looking at two teams that can score on paper, you are looking at a strong home defense that is comfortable slowing things down with a lead, a road offense that struggles against quality resistance, and injury-thin depth that makes it harder to keep up the pace for a full game. The number sitting up in that high 140s to low 150s pocket starts to feel a bit inflated compared to the style and recent scoring patterns we have actually seen on the floor. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. Cincinnati versus Arizona. Arizona walks into this matchup at home in McKell Center, sitting at 18-0 overall and 5-0 in conference play, and sitting at the top of the AP poll as one of only 3 undefeated teams left right now. Cincinnati shows up at 10-8, 2-3 in the same brutal league, and instead of easing into midseason, they get thrown right into the noise and chaos of Tucson on a night when the home fans are expecting a show, not a scare. You can almost feel the contrast just looking at these two profiles, one side playing like a runaway train that has not even thought about slowing down yet, the other trying to grind through a schedule that keeps handing them body blows. Arizona is averaging 90.6 points per game and winning by more than 21 points on average, which is wild when you remember this is not a cupcake schedule. They play at roughly 75 possessions a night, so it is fast, but not wild pickup ball, and they manage to keep that tempo while still playing real, structured defense. Cincinnati, on the other hand, lives closer to the old school, grinded-out style, around 74 points scored and 66 allowed with something like 72 to 73 possessions per game. It is competitive, it is tough, but it is more we will hang around and make this hard for you than we will blow your doors off and be up 20 at the under 12 timeout. In a quiet building, that kind of profile can absolutely pull off surprises. In a building like McKell, with that tempo and that offensive firepower on the other side, the cushion for the underdog gets smaller and smaller with every run. Cincinnati does bring a defensive backbone that travels, and that matters, especially in conference play where everybody knows everybody's sets. But the recent road form has not exactly screamed confidence, with 7 straight losses away from home, and that tells you something about how hard it has been for them to string together 40 clean minutes in someone else's gym. They also come in with the rotation already thin, with at least one guard ruled out for the season and a transfer forward who had knee surgery and was labeled out indefinitely, and there has not been a clear public he is absolutely back and ready signal since. Even if you give them the benefit of the doubt, that still leaves a cloud over their depth chart. In a game where the opponent is deep, happy to run, and very comfortable stepping on the gas in front of their own crowd, that kind of uncertainty usually shows up as tired legs in the second half, slower closeouts, and just a little less resistance every time the home team makes a push. Put that all together and the matchup reads like another chance for Arizona to do what they have been doing, play fast, lean on that combination of tempo and efficiency, and keep the pressure on until the other side finally breaks. There is always a chance the underdog hangs around for 30 minutes, sure, but this specific blend of home court energy, undefeated confidence, and a favorite that clearly enjoys front-running sets the stage for a result where the margin is more likely to stretch than shrink late. As our first pick for this matchup, the Arizona Wildcats to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick, and the total number sitting on the board in the low to mid 150s is basically the market tipping its cap to Arizona's scoring habits. When you see a team hanging around 90 points a night, your first instinct is usually to think track meet and lean toward a game that turns into a fireworks show from the jump. Honestly, it is tempting because Arizona has had nights where it feels like they might hit a team total over on their own. Here is the thing, though, the other side of the ball matters just as much for that number. Arizona is not padding stats in loose, no-defense games. They are holding opponents to 69.3 points on about 40% shooting, and most of the major metrics have them graded as a top 15 defensive unit. Cincinnati lives in that same neighborhood on the efficiency charts, with one widely used ranking slotting the Bearcats 9th on defense and Arizona 12th. So you have two groups that can really guard, and that is a very different picture from the strawman idea of Arizona as just a run-and-gun outfit. Cincinnati's scoring profile backs that up. They are at 74.1 points for and 66.2 against, and they sit around 247th nationally in scoring. That is not an insult. It is just proof they prefer games that live in the 60s and low 70s. When they face stronger opponents, their way to survive is to drag the tempo down, be physical, and turn every possession into a small wrestling match instead of a sprint. Their recent totals show that clearly, with 8 of their last 9 landing under the number, and that pattern tends to follow them on the road. Those 7 straight road losses have not been about trading threes all night. They have usually featured stretches where the offense goes quiet and the whole thing turns kind of choppy and stop-start. On the Arizona side, the pace is high, but it is not reckless. Because they can defend and they have depth, once they build a real cushion, the logical script is to manage the game, lean into their defense, and let the clock work in their favor. Especially in a spot where they are lined as a solid favorite, the second half can easily tilt toward longer possessions, more bench minutes, and fewer all-out transition bursts. And when you stack that tendency on top of a total that has already been nudged upward by Arizona's reputation for big offensive nights, it starts to feel like the number is expecting a cleaner, more free-flowing game than these two defenses usually allow. So between a Cincinnati team that is comfortable turning games into rock fights, an Arizona team that quietly guards at a very high level, and a total that reflects more of the highlight reels than the full statistical picture, the more likely outcome is a scoreboard that lags behind that 150-plus expectation rather than racing past it. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. San Diego State versus Grand Canyon. This one feels like a late-night Mountain West fight in a packed little box, with a line that basically says the books cannot split these two and the crowd is going to have a blast watching someone walk out with bragging rights. San Diego State comes in sitting at 13-4 overall and 7-0 in league play, riding the momentum of that 83-79 win over New Mexico and the absolutely wild 110-107 triple overtime survival against Boise State earlier in the month, which already tells you they have lived through some chaos this season. Grand Canyon stands at 11-6 and 4-2 in its first Mountain West campaign, fresh off that statement 84-74 win over ranked Utah State in this very building, so their confidence is not exactly in short supply either, especially at home. Layer on top a spread around San Diego State -1.5 with the total pegged in the low 140s, and you get a matchup that the market is treating like a coin flip where the tiniest edges in toughness, depth, or composure might matter more than any single stat line. Grand Canyon's gym is notorious for a reason. The Havocs turn it into a constant noise machine, and it really does feel more like a concert than a traditional college arena at times, which is a huge emotional boost when the home team goes on a run. The flip side is that San Diego State has basically built its personality on walking into environments exactly like that and refusing to blink, and under Brian Dutcher, they have stacked up one of the strongest multi-year records in the country, especially away from home, where that calm road identity has become a calling card rather than a slogan. It is not that the noise does not matter. It does, it just tends to matter less when you are talking about a team that already expects every possession to feel like a half-court wrestling match. Defensively, Grand Canyon absolutely deserves its respect, ranking around the top 35 nationally in efficiency and generally dragging opponents into the high 60s in scoring behind a front line that got a real lift when Dennis Evans and Nana Owusu-Anani finally hit the court again after missing last season. They are both active now, they both bring serious length, and when you add in the guard play that just produced 40 combined points from Brian Moore Jr. and Makai Williams in that Utah State win, you get a picture of a team that can throw a lot of different looks at you without feeling soft at any position. Honestly, if you only watched that game, you would come away thinking this is the new bully on the Mountain West block, and in that single context, you would not be crazy to think it. San Diego State, though, comes at you in a different way, with that crazy deep rotation that can run 10-plus players without much of a drop-off, and the numbers back it up. Their bench is pouring in more than 40 points per night and ranks second in the entire country in scoring. Almost half of their total points are coming from non-starters, which is kind of outrageous when you think about college rotations usually shrinking, not expanding, once the stakes get higher. Guards like B.J. Davis and Miles Byrd are not just names on a depth chart. They have been closing actual wins over Wyoming and New Mexico recently, and they are both on the active roster without any current injury flags. So you are talking about fresh legs late in games instead of hope the starters can finish this out tired possessions. That is where the contrast sneaks in. Grand Canyon leans a lot more on a smaller core, and while that can be great on a hot night, it gets a bit scarier when foul trouble or fatigue show up in a tight second half. Injuries are the one real cloud hanging over the San Diego State side right now, and it is worth treating that seriously. Forward Magoon Gwath, who is on the current roster, is officially listed as questionable with a hip issue after leaving the New Mexico game, and big man Thakbor Majak carries a questionable tag as well with an undisclosed problem. Both of those notes are accurate as of now, and there is no confirmed word about either one being ruled in or out yet, so anything beyond questionable depth pieces would be speculation and not a fact. Grand Canyon, on the other hand, is in a much cleaner spot physically, with no current official injury listings heading into this matchup, and Owusu Anani already back on the floor contributing again after missing last season, which means their front line should be at full strength unless something changes very late. Form-wise, San Diego State has turned into a bit of a two-way hammer over the last stretch, which might sound like an exaggeration until you look at what they are doing on both ends. They are scoring around 82 points per game, one of the best offensive clips the program has ever had, and over their last 11 they have still managed to keep opponents near 68.5 per night, even with that triple overtime Boise thriller inflating the totals. Inside Mountain West play, efficiency sites have them first in the league in effective field goal defense, turnover rate, 2-point percentage allowed, block rate, and steal rate, and second in overall defensive efficiency, which reads like someone accidentally filled out a wish list instead of a leaderboard. That kind of defensive checklist is exactly what you want when you walk into a building you cannot easily control emotionally, because it lets you control the one thing that always travels, effort on that end. Grand Canyon is coming off its own emotional high with that Utah State win, but San Diego State has just spent weeks fighting through Boise State in triple overtime, then a rough road night at Wyoming, then a late-game grinder with New Mexico, and they have stayed perfect in league through all of it. So if you zoom out a bit and ignore the crowd noise for a second, you have a Grand Canyon team with a strong defense and a hot home result, and a San Diego State group with deeper rotation, more established late-game habits, and a track record of surviving exactly this kind of heavy atmosphere, all inside a spread that is basically just asking someone to win by a single possession. As our first pick for this matchup, the San Diego State Aztecs to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. The total number sits in the low 140s and looks a little tempting if you only glance at the scoring averages. On paper, San Diego State dropping about 82 per night and Grand Canyon living in the mid-70s while holding opponents under 70 suggests a game that could easily sail into the high 140s or even the low 150s if you just add those numbers together like a spreadsheet. The catch is that those raw averages are padded by overtime explosions, early non-conference mismatches, and a few nights where the whistle turned the last 2 minutes into a free throw parade, which is not really the script this particular matchup is likely to follow. Once league play kicks into gear, San Diego State has started to look a lot more like its old identity, the one that made the Final Four, where everything begins with defense and the offense is almost a reward for getting stops. Grand Canyon's best versions this season have shown up when they slow things down and let that size and length suffocate teams like Northern Illinois into turnovers, or, in Utah State's case, into bad decisions and contested jumpers all night long. So the common thread for both sides, when they are playing their best basketball, is not run-and-gun highlight reels, it is possession-by-possession control, even if the final score sometimes suggests more fireworks than there really were for most of the night. Tempo-wise, both teams sit in that roughly 68 possessions per game zone, which is basically average or a touch slower. And that innocuous little number matters a lot when you stack it on top of two good defenses. When you are not racing up and down, every wasted trip, every empty corner three, every thrown-away entry pass chips away at the chances of a high-scoring night, especially in a game where both staffs are keenly aware that this one will be replayed in March conversations. San Diego State likes to use its depth to extend pressure just enough to make ball handlers uncomfortable, then drag you through long half-court sets, and Grand Canyon is perfectly happy to meet that with its own grinded-out approach where blocked shots and defensive stands are as energizing for the crowd as dunks on the other end. The injury situation quietly nudges things toward fewer points rather than more, which is not always intuitive but makes sense here. If Guath and Magic are limited or end up playing reduced roles because of those hip and undisclosed issues, that takes away a bit of San Diego State's vertical pop and some easy rim running, which usually means more jumpers and more crowded driving lanes instead of free cuts to the basket. We simply do not know yet whether they will go or not, and that uncertainty itself is important because it forces San Diego State to plan for lineups that lean more on skill and spacing than raw size inside, which tends to slow things slightly rather than speed them up. On the other side, Grand Canyon finally has a fully stocked front court with Owusu and N back and Evans rounding into shape, and no current injury listings, so their rim protection and defensive rebounding should be in a good place, which again points to more contested twos and fewer easy finishes. There is also that human part that never quite shows up in a box score. This is one of Grand Canyon's first real We Belong Here home showcase games in the Mountain West against the program everyone associates with toughness and postseason runs, and that kind of night tends to make coaches a little more conservative with tempo, not less. San Diego State's own preview material leans hard on the defensive identity, pointing out that under Dutcher they have held opponents to 60 points or fewer in close to 44% of their games, and right now in conference they are leading almost every major defensive category. A team that proud of its defensive resume does not usually walk into a hyped road game and decide to trade quick threes for 40 minutes. Instead, you usually get those long, careful possessions where everyone is trying not to be the person who makes the mistake that swings the whole building, which looks great on film but is not exactly how you get a 78-75 type final without serious shooting variance. So while that 143.5 number might look modest next to the season-long averages, when you blend in the likely pace, the defensive ceilings, the possible impact of San Diego State's banged-up depth pieces, and the sheer emotional weight of the night, it becomes a lot easier to picture a game where the scoreboard grinds toward the 60s or low 70s combined, rather than a carefree shootout. Could you get another triple overtime circus that blows everything up? Sure, but that is the kind of thing you remember because it is rare, not something you can reasonably plan on happening twice in such a short span. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. That's all for now, so if you have any other games you would like reviewed, then leave a comment down below with the game you would like analyzed, subscribe to our channel, leave a like on this video, and we'll get to it as soon as we possibly can. We would also love to hear your opinion on the picks presented to you in this video, whether you agree or disagree with them, so leave a comment down below and do let us know.